Night fell like a drumbeat over Kabira, as thunder rolled across the acacia ridge. Amara said, "The air tastes like iron," and the elders nodded, eyes fixed on the sky. Baba Sifu raised the star-etched calabash, lips trembling with a prayer. The wind answered, tearing ash from the shrine and strewing memories like birds. Kato said, "Stay close, Amara," but the drums slowed, as if listening to a stranger at the gate. A bolt burst over the baobab, white as ancestral breath, and the calabash cracked. Baba Sefu staggered, and the village gas broke like a wave. He gripped Amara's wrist and whispered, "Starbearer," and his voice seemed older than soil. The calabash split clean through, and a shard flared, marking Amara's palm with light. Abeni said, "It should not be her," and envy showed like moonlight on steel. Chief Obasi watched from shadow, smile coiled tight, as the storm bent low to hear a curse awaken. Dawn found the village veiled in smoke and damp ash, and grief folded over the huts like cloth. Amara said, "He called me Starbearer," and the word stung, sweet and heavy. Kato walked beside her, patient as a shield, eyes red from a sleepless watch. Abeni passed without meeting her gaze, footsteps quick as a secret fleeing daylight. The shrine smoldered, and birds sang a thin, broken tune above the baobab. Amara said, "If I refuse, will the sky leave us be?" But the wind answered with dust. Old mothers poured water in a circle, and named their ancestors like beads. Obasi arrived with condolences that felt sharp enough to cut bread. He said, "The village needs order," and his smile refused to bend. Amara touched her bandaged palm and felt a throb like a distant drum promising thunder. At the river bend, relics from Baba Sefu's chest waited like questions. Amara said, "Teach me to carry this," and the water shivered as if hearing the name. Kato set a spear across the bank and watched the reeds. A woven map showed constellations folding into the hills behind Kabira. Abeni arrived with herbs for mourning, eyes lowered, voice clipped like a frayed rope. She said, "Take the amulet," and her fingers lingered an instant too long. Obase's messengers brought edicts for new patrols and new taxes in the name of safety. The river brightened, and a fish flashed like a star in shallow current. Amara said, "If the gods test me, I will answer with both hands," and the bandage warmed. Somewhere a drum began a narrow, steady beat that felt like a path opening. The council gathered in a circle of carved stools, each crease a history. Obasi said, "Tradition must bow to survival," and the word bowed like a man forced to his knees. Amara stood with steady breath, feeling the star mark itch beneath cloth. Kato said, "Let her speak," and the room inhaled. Abeni watched the floor as if truth lived in dust. An elder woman lifted a gourd and sang a line that braided courage with grief. Amara said, "I will face the trial, but not alone," and the walls remembered thunder. The council fire hissed, and smoke sketched ancestors on the rafters. Obasi smiled without warmth and counted votes like coins. The circle tightened, and the day seemed to lean toward evening. Evening bled into purple as Amara packed the chest with amulet, map, and a shard of the calabash. Kato said, "At first light we walk," and his voice felt like ground beneath feet. Abeni hovered at the doorway, unasked words, heavy as rain. She said, "Do not fail," and it sounded like a prayer wrapped in a threat. Obasi's guards moved along the fence with measured steps, counting breaths. Amara tied her wrap and touched the mark, which throbbed like a second heart. She said, "Baba Sefu, show me the path," and a moth circled the lamp like a star learning to dance. The village drifted to sleep, but the huts listened. Drums far off spoke of trials that begin when names are spoken aloud. Night held its breath, and the road gathered itself beneath the moon. Amara followed the elder paths at dawn, the earth damp and alive with dew. She said, "If my hand is marked, let me learn its meaning." Baba Sefu's absence echoed like an empty drum, but the stars seemed closer than the sky. Kato walked behind her with steady steps, spear gripped firm, shoulders tense with unsaid fears. They reached the stone circle where elders once spoke to ancestors, and silence weighed heavy. A raven perched its black wings slick with night's last breath, croaked as though translating the spirits. Abeni arrived carrying dried herbs, gaze sharp, lips pressed as if swallowing words. Obesi's shadow stretched behind them, his robe rich, his eyes unreadable. He said, "We must decide quickly, for enemies smell weakness." Amara touched the glowing scar on her palm and whispered, "I will not be silent," and the circle trembled like it remembered voices long buried. By the riverside shrine, Amara knelt before carved idols worn smooth by rain and years. She said, "Show me what it means to bear the star." The water shimmered, rippling though wind was still. Kato stood watch, spear tip glinting, his eyes softening when he looked at her. Abeni ground herbs into paste, her hands quick, her breath shallow, her eyes flicking toward Amara's mark. She said, "Power does not come without cost." Obasi stepped forward, voice low. "What the gods give can destroy a village as swiftly as they save it." Amara pressed her hand against the water, and light spread like veins of fire across its surface. She whispered, "Then let me learn," as the river carried sparks downstream like a message to waiting ancestors. That night, the elders led Amara to the Hill of Fires, where stars seemed to sit closer to earth. Drums beat slow, echoing into the valley like heartbeats of the ancestors. Amara said, "I am ready," though her chest felt heavy with doubt. The wise elder Mosai, gray braids catching flamelight, said, "The trial begins with knowing who you are." Kato stood by, fists clenched, loyalty written in his jaw. Abeni lingered behind, arms folded, eyes hiding storms. Obasi watched every flicker, lips curved with calculation. Fire rose high, and sparks scattered like constellations reborn. Amara stepped into the circle of flame and shadow, the mark on her palm blazing, and for a breath, even the drums fell silent. Smoke curled into shapes of ancestors above the flames, faces forming and vanishing. Mosi said, "Your blood carries both burden and blessing." Amara answered, "I will carry them both for my people and for the gods." Her voice broke, but her eyes did not. Kato said, "We stand with you," and stepped closer, shoulders squared. Abeni whispered, "Some burdens crush more than they carry," her words sharp yet trembling. Obesi's hand flexed at his side, like a man ready to seize what was not his. The fire cracked, sending embers into the sky, and Amara's palm flared so brightly it lit every face. The circle inhaled as if the whole village had drawn a single breath. At dawn, after the fire dimmed, Amara walked alone to the edge of the ridge where the valley stretched endless. She whispered, "If the stars chose me, let me not fail them." Her bandaged palm pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. Kato appeared silently, setting a hand on her shoulder. He said, "No path is walked alone." Abeni lingered in the shadows of the trees, her gaze caught between envy and longing. Obasi stood near the council hut, voice carrying, "The trial will decide more than her fate. It will decide us all." Amara lifted her eyes to the brightening sky, and for the first time, the stars seemed to bow. The dry season pressed heavy on the land, dust rising with every step the villagers took toward the market square. Amara said, "Something stirs beneath these skies," her marked hand tingling like a whisper of fire. Kato walked beside her, eyes scanning for danger, his spear ready to answer shadows. The drums that once sang of unity now beat slower, burdened by doubt and fear. Abeni handed baskets of grain with forced smiles. Her words clipped, her gaze slipping toward Amara with unease. Obasi stood tall on the wooden dais, his robe blazing crimson in the morning light, his words sweet as honey yet sharp as iron. He said, "Our safety lies not in stars, but in strength I can bring." Murmurs grew in the crowd, some nodding, others frowning. Amara clenched her palm, the glow hidden, and whispered, "The gods have not abandoned us." But the air felt thick, and even the birds flew silent. Night returned with restless winds, scattering ash from cooking fires across the village paths. Amara sat at the shrine ruins, tracing the star mark beneath her wrap, eyes heavy with unanswered questions. She said, "If this power is mine, why do I feel chained?" Kato sat nearby sharpening his blade, sparks flashing like fireflies. He said, "Chains can be broken." Abeni brought a calabash of water, her voice sharp. "Some chains break only to bind others." The words hung heavy, and her glance cut like a blade toward Amara. Obesi's men patrolled the outer ring, their silhouettes tall and stern. From the baobab's roots, whispers rose like voices remembering old grievances. Amara closed her eyes and heard her name carried on the wind, Starbearer. The night deepened, and unease crawled through every hut. The following day, drums summoned the people to the clearing where trials of courage were once held. Amara stood before a ring of stones, her heart racing, but her face steady. She said, "If the gods demand proof, I will give it." Kato planted his spear into the ground beside her, eyes fierce with loyalty. Abeni lingered behind, her whispers lost in the wind, her envy etched deep. Obesi addressed the crowd, his voice rolling like thunder. "She is untested, unworthy, and yet she dares claim destiny." Murmurs rippled, dividing the circle. The wise elder Mosai raised a hand and said, "Let her face the trial, as all starbearers must." Amara stepped forward into the ring, palm glowing faintly, the earth trembling, as if the gods themselves leaned closer to watch. The trial began with fire, torches lit in a circle, their flames twisting as the wind rose. Amara said, "I will walk this path," and stepped between the flames. Heat clawed at her skin, but her palm glowed brighter, guiding her. Kato clenched his fists, fighting the urge to rush forward, trust and fear battling within him. Abeni whispered to herself, "She will fall," though her voice cracked. Obesi's eyes glittered, his smile thin, enjoying the tension like a hunter watching prey. Elder Mosi said, "The flame measures truth, it consumes lies." Amara's shadow danced tall, as if more than one soul walked with her. The villagers held their breath, watching the mark blaze like a second sun. When Amara emerged, unburned, the crowd gasped, some in awe, some in fear. She said, "The gods see truth," her voice clear as a bell. Kato rushed forward, pride shining in his eyes. Abeni looked away, her jaw tight, envy coiling deeper. Obasi stepped forward, his tone smooth as silk, "Surviving fire proves nothing without wisdom." The words divided the people, some nodding, others muttering. Elder Mosi raised his hand. "The trial is not finished. The stars themselves must bear witness." Above, the sky darkened, though the sun still hung, and a single star blinked into view. Amara lifted her palm toward it, the mark blazing in answer, and silence swept the clearing like a tide. The council met again beneath the rafters blackened with years of smoke. Amara stood before them, her palm still burning faintly, even in daylight. She said, "The gods have spoken through trial, and I remain." Obasi leaned forward, voice dripping with challenge. "Fire does not make a leader, wisdom does." Kato shifted closer, his spear upright, his gaze locked on Obasi. Abeni sat stiff, her arms folded, her silence carrying daggers sharper than words. Elder Mosi raised his staff and said, "A leader walks with the people, not above them." The fire crackled low, shadows playing like ghosts on the walls. The villagers murmured, torn between awe and fear. Amara steadied her breath, whispering to herself, "I will not falter," though doubt scratched at the edges of her heart. Outside, the villagers gathered in restless knots, voices rising like the wind before a storm. Some praised Amara, others doubted her claim, their words like stones thrown in the air. Kato said, "They fear change as much as they fear gods." Amara met his eyes, whispering, "Then I must earn both their trust and their fear." Abeni approached, her smile thin, her words sharp. She said, "If you stumble, the whole village falls with you." Obasi strode past with his guards, addressing the people, "I will not let tradition trap us in weakness." Murmurs grew, dividing hearts, while smoke from cookfires curled into uncertain skies. Amara's mark glowed faintly, and the children stared wide-eyed as though watching a living legend rise from ash. That night, Amara sat alone by the riverbank, the stars mirrored in the current. She whispered, "Why me? Ancestors, why now?" The water shimmered with faint light as if answering in silence. Kato emerged from the trees, carrying a spear and a worried look. He said, "Your strength makes others fear, but fear is power if carried well." Abeni appeared, her footsteps soft, her gaze unreadable. She said, "Power divides as easily as it protects." The words stung, and Amara searched her face, unsure if it was warning or envy. Abesi's torches flared on the far bank, his guard standing tall. His voice carried, "Tomorrow, the people will see who truly deserves their loyalty." Amara's mark throbbed with heat, as if bracing for the storm to come. The next day, the market was alive with noise, goats bleating, and clay pots clattering, but tension lingered. Abeni spoke loudly, "The gods choose chaos, but I bring order." His words wrapped around the crowd like rope. Amara stood tall at the edge of the stalls, her palm glowing through cloth. She said, "No rope binds a free people." Kato moved closer, hand gripping spear, his eyes never leaving Abeni. Abeni slipped through the crowd, speaking in hushed tones to villagers, her words sparking both doubt and intrigue. Elder Mosey watched quietly from a distance, his silence heavy with thought. The drums began to beat, steady and slow, as though the land itself awaited a decision. At twilight the drums thundered, calling all to the hill of gatherings. Fires lit the clearing, faces glowing with expectation. Amara stood in the center, raising her hand. She said, "If I lead, it is not for myself but for all of you." Kato planted his spear, voice steady. "We will protect what is ours." Abeni stepped forward suddenly, voice sharp. "And if she fails, the gods will bury us all." Murmurs rippled like a storm through the crowd. Abeni smirked, his tone cutting. "You hear her doubt. Is this who you follow?" Elder Mosey struck his staff, voice booming. "The trial of truth is not finished. The gods will answer." Flames roared higher as the night deepened, and even the stars seemed to lean closer. The night cracked with whispers as Amara followed Elder Mosey into the hidden cave carved beneath the hill. The walls glowed faintly, painted with constellations older than memory. Amara said, "These stars live within me." Mosey's voice was steady. "You are of a bloodline lost to time, a child of the Starbearers." Kato's breath caught, his hand tightening on his spear. Abeni stepped closer, her eyes sharp, her tone bitter. So all this was given to her, not earned. Abesi's shadow lingered near the entrance, his face unreadable, his silence like a blade waiting. The glow from Amara's palm mirrored the ancient carvings until the whole cave shimmered like night had been trapped within stone. Amara whispered, "If I am chosen, I will not refuse it." The cave rumbled as though ancestors stirred awake. At dawn, Amara walked into the village circle, her palm burning brighter than the sun's first rays. She said, "My blood carries what was hidden, and I will not deny it." Murmurs tore through the crowd, some in awe, others recoiling. Kato stood behind her, shoulders squared, his voice firm. "She has walked fire and survived truth." Abeni stepped forward, voice sharp. "Blood is not strength. What of those who toil, unseen?" Her words pulled hearts toward her. Abeni spread his arms, voice rich. "The gods favor her, but people must favor me." Elder Mosey struck his staff, silencing the chaos. He said, "The trial deepens, and choice will break or bind us all." The mark on Amara's hand flared, brighter than it had ever been. That night, Abeni crept into the sacred hut where relics rested, her heart pounding like a war drum. She whispered, "If destiny will not choose me, I will seize it." She reached for the calabash shard, glowing faintly on its woven mat. Amara arrived, catching her in the act, voice steady but trembling. "Sister, do not betray yourself." Abeni's face twisted. "I am more than your shadow." Kato burst in, blocking the doorway, his spear raised but eyes sorrowful. Abeni's voice slipped from the shadows, calm and venomous. "Let her take it. Only struggle proves worth. Elder Mosey's presence filled the hut, his voice thunderous. This is not struggle, it is ruin. The shard pulsed between Abena's hands, burning with dangerous light. The shard cracked, spilling light that lit the hut like a small sun. Amara cried, "It will destroy us if taken wrongly." Abeni's hands trembled, torn between ambition and fear. Kato lunged, shielding Amara from the blast of light. Obasi smiled, whispering, "Let it burn, and I will rise from the ash." Elder Mosey slammed his staff into the ground, the vibration dimming the shard's fury. He said, "Only the chosen blood can wield it without ruin." Amara's palm blazed, pulling the shard's light toward her, while Abeni fell back, gasping. The hut shook, rafters groaning, villagers rushing outside to witness the glow spilling through the cracks. Amara whispered, "I will not let it consume us," as the shard dimmed into her hand. At dawn, the village stood silent, their eyes fixed on Amara as she emerged holding the shard, now dimmed and whole in her palm. She said, "The gods entrusted this power to protect, not destroy." Kato stood close, his voice firm, "And we will guard it together." Abeni wept quietly behind them. Her envy cracked open into shame. Obasi addressed the crowd, tone sharp, "She toys with power that will bring ruin." But Elder Mosai lifted his hand, "The gods have chosen, and none may deny it." The villagers bowed heads, torn between fear and reverence. Amara lifted her palm, the shard glowing softly like dawn itself, and whispered, "I will not fail." The first rays of sunlight broke, painting her in gold. The hill of trials burned with torches as the villagers gathered, the night alive with drum beats that shook the earth. Amara stepped forward, her palm glowing, and whispered, "I am ready." Elder Mosey's voice thundered, "Tonight the gods test not your body but your spirit." Kato clenched his spear, his gaze fixed on her, every heartbeat echoing loyalty. Abeni lingered in the shadows, torn between envy and sorrow, whispering, "If she rises, I will be forgotten." Obasi raised his hands, voice rich, "The gods favor chaos, but I favor strength. Choose me, and order will remain." The villagers murmured, divided, their faces lit by flame and fear. Amara closed her eyes, feeling her ancestors press close, their whispers guiding her into the trial that could save or end her people. The ground trembled as the sky cracked with lightning, a storm gathering, though no rain fell. Amara entered the circle, flames bowing as if in reverence. She said, "If I am Starbearer, let the gods speak through me." Kato shouted, "Stand firm," though fear quivered in his voice. Abeni's tears glistened in the firelight, her whisper bitter, "That power should have been mine." Obasi's smile curled as thunder shook the air, his eyes hungry for her fall. Elder Mosey's staff struck the ground, "Let the ancestors show truth." The flames leapt higher, surrounding Amara, her palm shining brighter than lightning, her body trembling as the voices of the spirits surged into her bones. The villagers gasped, some kneeling, some fleeing. The spirits rose in smoke and flame, shapes of ancestors walking among the living. One said, "Amara, you carry our broken bloodline." Another whispered, "Will you rise, or betray us as others did?" Amara gasped, the voices like thunder in her chest. She said, "I will not betray, even if I must fall." Kato shouted from the edge, "She is stronger than your doubt." Abeni clutched her chest, torn between pride and rage. Obasi's voice cut sharp, "The gods expose weakness, see how she trembles." Elder Mosey lifted his staff, his chant weaving strength into the night. Amara lifted her palm, its light spreading across the spirits, steadying them. For a moment, silence fell as if the world itself waited for her choice. The spirits merged into a single towering figure of light and shadow, its voice shaking the ground, "Prove your heart." Amara's legs buckled, yet she stood firm, whispering, "I carry all of them, even the broken and the lost." Kato's voice cracked, "You are not alone." Abeni shouted suddenly, "Then prove you carry me too." Her words pierced silence, her face twisted with pain. Obasi's laughter echoed, Her weakness will be your undoing. Elder Mosey's voice thundered, strength is not domination but sacrifice. Amara pressed her palm to the ground, the mark blazing into the soil, sending waves of light across the circle. The spirits recoiled, then bowed, their forms flickering like dying stars. The trial neared its peak. The storm broke, wind roaring, torches nearly snuffed, as the gods gave their answer. The mark on Amara's palm burst into pure starlight, wrapping her in radiance. She cried, "I accept my destiny not for myself but for my people." Kato dropped to his knees, tears streaming, whispering, "You are chosen." Abeni fell back, weeping, torn apart by regret and awe. Obesi's face hardened, fury blazing, "This ends with me, not her." Elder Mosi raised both hands, voice booming, "The trial is done, and the Starbearer rises." The villagers bowed low, fear and reverence mingling. The spirits vanished into night, leaving only starlight pulsing on Amara's skin. The gods had chosen, and the path forward burned with peril. Dawn broke with silence, the storm gone, but the air still heavy with the gods' echo. Amara stood on the ridge, her palm glowing faint as starlight, her face calm but weary. She whispered, "The trial is over, but the path remains." Kato stepped close, hand steady on her shoulder, "You did not falter, and we will follow." Abeni lingered behind, her eyes red, her voice soft. "I was blind, but I see now." Obasi glared from a distance, his robe torn by the storm, his words bitter, "The gods may choose you, but men do not bow so easily." Elder Mosi raised his staff and said, "The Starbearer rises, and the village must choose light or shadow." The villagers gathered in the circle once more, their faces mixed with awe, fear, and hope. Amara spoke, her voice steady, "I will lead, not as ruler, but as servant of the people and the gods." Murmurs rippled, and children stepped closer, their eyes wide with wonder. Kato said firmly, "She carries us all, and I will guard her path." Abeni lowered her head, whispering, "Forgive me." Obesi's jaw tightened and he hissed, "You may hold their hearts, but I will hold their doubt." Elder Mosi answered, "Doubt may linger, but destiny is unbroken." The drums began a slow beat, steady as a new dawn. That night, Amara walked alone to the river, the shard in her hand glowing faint like a heartbeat. She said softly, "Baba Sifu, ancestors, guide me still." The water shimmered, carrying starlight across its surface. Kato appeared from the shadows, his voice gentle, "You don't have to walk alone." Amara smiled faintly, "But some steps must be mine." Abeni watched from the trees, guilt pressing on her shoulders. Obesi's torch flared on the far bank, his face hard, his silence heavy with plans yet unspoken. Elder Mosi's words echoed in Amara's memory, "The Starbearer carries both burden and blessing." She closed her eyes, letting the river's song steady her soul. The council fire burned low as Elder Mosi gathered the village. He said, "The gods chose, but it is our choice to follow or resist." Amara stepped into the glow, her voice ringing, "I will carry the star not for power, but for unity." The villagers bowed, some slowly, others with relief. Kato stood at her back, solid as stone. Abeni spoke clearly for the first time, "I will walk beside her, not against." Obesi's voice cut cold, "I will never kneel." His words stung, but Amara answered, "Then walk in shadow, while we walk in light." Silence fell heavy, the flames crackling like a heartbeat for the whole village. At dawn, Amara stood on the ridge once more, gazing into the endless horizon. She whispered, "The path ahead is long, but I will walk it." Kato joined her side, saying, "Together, always." Abeni bowed her head, silent but resolute. Obasi lingered in shadow, his eyes still burning, his defeat not yet surrender. Elder Mosi raised his staff one final time. The Starbearer's trial is complete, but her journey has only begun. The villagers stood behind her, their voices hushed, their hearts stirred. The rising sun washed the land in gold, and Amara lifted her palm, the star mark blazing. For a breath, It felt as if the heavens bowed.